right. So first, I wanted to actually thank the sponsors of the event. This is the second time I've done the FinJS event. The first time was in London a few months ago. So I really would like to thank ICO's partners, Giant Machines, Scott Logic, and the Symphony Foundation, and of course, OpenFin, Mazi, Mitra, and the team have done, I think, a great job of putting together a really meaningful event. So I'd love to just kind of give them All right, enough of the brown nosing, we're done. All right. So today I want to talk about Node.js and how it relates to financial services. We actually see a lot of patterns at NodeSource. We are, as Mazi mentioned, the Node.js company. We kind of think of us kind of what Red Hat does for Linux or what Cloudera does for, what Cloudera does for Hadoop. We kind of do that for Node.js. We have been super mega focused on the open source project from day one. And to this day, we actually are a company as a startup that has the most core committers and core contributors to the project. And the project's sort of chairperson or lead, Rod Vag, who leads the Node.js project and represents the core team on the foundation. But we are also a business, so we also focus on the commercial aspect of Node. And I want to talk a little bit about how we're seeing Node play out in the business space, not necessarily just in open source. But first I wanted to start off with a personal story, which might resonate with this room. So believe it or not, I was a trader at one point. Yeah. Long time ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Before HFT really became a thing, I worked on a prop desk on Wall Street, and the skill that I learned there that we were taught on this desk was tape reading, right? So we weren't actually reading a physical printout, tape, right? But the concept was we were able to read the prints that were hitting our monitor and kind of see what was happening and be able to determine with, not certainty, but with a strong enough sort of sense of, clarity on what was happening in the market so that we could execute trades that were beneficial in our favor. And that skill is really just pattern recognition. And here I am, 11 years later running an enterprise open source company. And the skill that I'm learning around pattern recognition is something that we use every day at NodeSource because we see a lot. We work with a lot of companies, we work with the open source community. And recognizing these patterns is something that we've helped a lot of our customers benefit from. So, of course, we are the enterprise Node.js company. We focus, primarily on the business use cases of Node. And we have a commercial product that's, it is Node.js. We wrap it with additional security capabilities, performance profiling, that sort of thing. We've worked with lots of customers in, of course, financial services. Many of them I can't mention for obvious reasons, but we've also worked with a number of other companies that I'll mention today that we can talk about and see sort of the benefits that they're getting with Node. So what are some of the common patterns, first of all, with Node usage in the enterprise, particularly as it relates to financial services? First up is this concept that it's probably familiar to some folks here that we call the front-end backend pattern. Now, it sounds a little odd, this front-end backend. What is that? Well, if you think about from maybe the late 1990s up until 2010 or so, we had a very somewhat standard way of building websites and web applications. You had your front-end team. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript was pretty much their focus, and the back-end team was writing stuff in Java or .NET, Python, PHP, etc. And it turns out that as applications got more dynamic and more real-time, there's a desire for the front-end team to actually iterate a little bit faster than the back-end team. And that's not necessarily just because they want to use the new shiny JavaScript framework du jour. It's that their customers are actually demanding a better experience. And so when you have a certain amount of latency when you're having to deal with that back-end team to get them to ship you the assets that you need on that front end, it will slow you down. And so what we've seen is instead of people trying to replace the back end, which we know will never happen, they actually put Node sort of in the middle there. So it's the back end to the front end team. So the front end says, hey, we need some new JavaScript or a JSON payload, we're using React, whatever that thing might be, and we want a service to send that to us. Node acts really well in that particular case because it can still communicate to the legacy APIs and back-end pieces while still allowing the front-end team to just communicate with that one API. In the mobile space, we've seen a lot of success with moving towards a mobile backend as a service that's completely written with Node. We saw this with folks using Feed Henry, which was acquired by Red Hat a few years ago. But more importantly, a lot of customers will actually build their entire new mobile web sort of setup with Node from the beginning. Now, not everyone has the ability to go greenfield and just start something new, but we found some people have been able to repurpose a lot of the desktop experience or the desktop assets with Node as sort of serving it up as that almost a front-end, back-end pattern again. One of the questions that I get a lot of times from people is, well, Node is great for sort of web and that sort of thing. It's never really doing anything mission critical. And there are actually a number of companies that are doing mission critical things with Node.js, and I'll talk about one here in a second. But the reason is that as we see internet connected devices sort of explode, right? We have mobile devices, smart devices, sort of connected cars. All of these things are communicating to some server at some point. Node is actually really good at handling this, and also the ability for developers to actually spin up new APIs with Node is very, very easy. And then finally, this last pattern happens a lot, particularly in heavily regulated industries like financial services. This internal platform as a service. We've seen this over and over and over again because a lot of people can't use things like Bluemix or Pivotal's Cloud Foundry, so they end up having to roll their own. And the choice of technology happens to be Node in almost every case. So let's talk about a few of those success stories that have been adopting these particular patterns. First up is Mastercard. Mastercard released a crypto as a service internally that's consumed by all of the digital payments that come from your phone. So believe it or not, the Android Pay, Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, Mastercard transactions are actually hitting a Node.js service for crypto. So if you need proof of a mission critical system, I think Node sitting in there as a crypto service is proof. Now the other thing though is that Mastercard has benefited from Node's non-blocking I/O model to allow for a lot of throughput for these types of transactions to exist. And they've had such great success that they're actually starting to see Node spread throughout many other parts of the organization. So you land with something small like crypto at Mastercard, and you sort of see it sort of grow internally because the benefits are just so worth it. Fidelity had this challenge where they were needing to serve their customers better experiences. They have all of these applications, a ton of applications, and the CTO, Travell Perkins, was actually tasked with how can you go faster? How can you deliver better experiences? But you have to stay within our data centers, right? So they built this project called Mako that is an internal platform as a service, and it's become so critical to how they actually deliver experiences that the entire CI/CD system is effectively built around it nowadays. And they're able to actually deliver better experiences not only for external-facing customers, and I think this is the thing that a lot of folks forget about the financial services industry, but your customers are also your teams internally, given the size of some of these organizations. Not on this slide is American Express. They're doing a very similar thing where they built an internal platform as a service, and Node is a key component of a deploy target for those types of applications. PayPal is sort of the canonical example of how to do Node really well in the enterprise, but they've had such great success with Node's sort of the agility you get from Node in developing applications so quickly that they've been able to roll out over 100 applications in just a few years in production. They've also been able to use Node in a way that they're able to measure and monitor things in a way that is clumsy in sort of more legacy technologies. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that they're able to benefit from the pace that you can move with Node to actually A/B test or even multivariate test the experiences that customers are going to see on a daily basis. So, I've been using PayPal for 20-ish years or so. There was a lot left to be desired, let's be frank, in the experience for a long time. Since they've started to adopt Node, I think it's pretty overwhelming how much the experience has actually improved. CapitalOne is an interesting one because this is a company that has 5,000 developers. They have 3 different versions of their enterprise API, and the front-end team is trying to manage to that. What Node is also really good at is acting as sort of this API glue, or the ability to sort of stitch together a lot of different APIs for one common API contract. So they were able to do this for their front-end devs to effectively communicate with one API and enable them to actually develop better experiences for their customers. Now, an interesting side effect, we do see this a lot with Node. I was talking with some folks yesterday at a bank about the sort of hiring and retaining talent benefit that you get from bringing Node into your organization. CapitalOne actually has happier developers because they feel more productive. And I don't know how you measure happiness. You can try to do internal surveys, and we know that's kind of BS, but this is meaningful because if your developers are actually happy, they're more productive, they ship faster and higher quality code. It's something that we should really pay attention to. So what is the most compelling reason then for folks in this room and outside this room to start adopting Node.js? Well, I think in a word, it's really agility, but without sacrificing security. And so at NodeSource, we're super passionate about the open source project, and we contribute heavily to it, and we make sure that CVEs are patched and delivered within a super fast amount of time. But we also recognize that on the enterprise side, there's a lot of need for additional hardening and security, so we focus on that as well. So we want people to feel comfortable using the open source project to move fast and be able to, frankly, compete in a very fast-changing technological landscape, but without feeling like they're a little, over their skis in terms of risk. So finally, the last question I get a lot from analysts, investors, et cetera, is where is Node actually heading? Now, in terms of financial services, there's a lot of different avenues it can go, but overall, it's really heading everywhere. So there's an explosion around Node in the desktop application space. We partner with OpenFin on this, as their runtime is actually based on Electron now. The NPM ecosystem is something that we're also focused on, not only in the community level, but also on the commercial aspect of securing the NPM ecosystem, and even hardware. So Node.js is actually running on a number of IoT devices natively. So Intel has actually invested heavily in this space, and we can start to see a similar pattern to what we saw with Java and Sun Microsystems back in the mid to late 90s. So with that, I'm really excited to be here, and I hope everyone learned a little bit more about Node.js today. Thank you.